Welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we are going to be learn about the functions in C++. Every developer often need to ability to break the programs up to smaller chunks that are easier to develop. Real-world programs can be many or of thousands or millions of line codes. Without its ability to divide the program into the parts, developing such large programs would quickly become impossible. C++ allows programmers to divide their code up into chunks known as functions. A function with a simple description and a well-defined interface to the outside world can be written and debugged without worrying about the code that's surrounding it. Function declarations tells the compiler about a function names, return types, and the parameters. A function definitions provide the actual body of the function. The C++ standard library provides numerous built-in functions that your programmers can call. For example, the functions which is star cat and another one is mem cap. Okay, so these are the two functions. What means two built-in functions. The starcat to concrete two strings functions and memory copies to copy one memory locations to another locations and many more functions. First of all, in this lecture, we define our function, then we declare our function, and then we call our functions. Okay. So, and at the last, we just pass the value of the function as an arguments. Now we just see how to define a function. You can always define the function from outside the main body. Like I have hash include iostream using name space std. Here I have int main, which is the main body. But when I just define the function, so I just write here return. Defining the function syntax is return type. Then you just write function name and then parameters of the list. And here you can write the body of the function. Okay, a C++ functions define consists of a function header and the function body. First of all, I just write here the return types. What is the return types? A function may have the return value. The return types is the data types of the value the functions return. Some functions perform the desired operations without returning a value. In this case, the return types is a keyword which is void. Then we go to the function name. This is the actual name of the function. The function name and the parameters list together constitute the function signature. Then we have the parameters here. A parameter is like a placeholder. When a function is invoked, you pass a value to the parameter. This value is preferred as actual parameter or argument. The parameter list refer to the type, order, and number of the parameter of the function. Parameters are optional. That is, a function may contain no parameters. Then we go to the function body. The function body consists of a collection of statements that define what the function does. Now we see the example of this function's definition. And here I just write integer which is max and then int num1 and integer num2. So I just define the return type which is integer, function name which is maximum, and then integer number 1 and integer number 2. So this is the declaration of the function. I mean, we define this function here. Now we go to the declaration. A function's declarations tell the compiler about the function's name and how to call the function. The actual body of the functions can be defined separately. Same like you have the return type, function name, and the parameters like this one. Then we go to the calling a function. While creating a C++ function, you give a definition of what the function has to do. To use a function, you will have to call or invoke that function. When a program calls a function's program control is transferred to the called function. A called function performs defined tasks and when its return statement is executed or when its function ended in close. While its function ending closing braces its reach its return programs control back to the main programs. Now we see how to now we see a program how to declare and call the function. So first of all, I just declare here int max and integer number 1 and integer number 2. We just go to the main file and define some local variables. So a which is equal to 50 and int b which is equal to 100. Then integer and integer is result. Okay. Now I just call a functions to get the maximum value between 1 and 2 means a and b. So here I just call a function. So rest which is equal to max this function name here and the parameters which are a and b. Now cout which is maximum value is, and here I just write rest and end line, and here I just write return 0. Now here returning the value between two numbers, integer function name, integer num1 and num2. Then here the local variable which is result and if condition. So if num1 is greater than num2, okay, so result here is num1. Go to the else result and the result here is num2 and return result. So here I write integer max as a function's definition. Then here I just call a functions to get the maximum value. Then here I just return the functions to get the maximum value between a and b means num1 and num2 means the value between our functions parameters. Now I just check the output. This is result, and now I just check the output for this code. So here we have an error which is I just not write the return type, and here I have if condition. So if num1 is greater than num2, and I just run this code, and you can see the output result which is the maximum value is 100. So here you can see it's compared num1 and num2 and gave us the value which is 100. Now we see the example of the functions calling the value by its reference. And here I write hash include iostream using name space std. Then here I just define the function which is change and integer data. Now integer main in data which is equal to 3, and here is called the function which is change and its data. Now cout which is the value of data is, and then data and line. And now return 0. Now here I just write void change and integer data, and then data which is equal to 5. So I just call this data by its reference here. So compile this code, and you can see the value of the data here is 3. You can see the value of the data is 3. So it is a calling by our reference program in C++. Now we just call our program by its pointer. So what is a pointer in the function? A function pointer is a variable that stores the addresses of a functions that can later be called through that function's pointer. This is useful because the functions encapsulate the behavior. For instance, every time you need a particular behavior such as drawing a line instead of writing out a bunch of code, all you need to do is call the function. But sometimes you would like to choose a different behavior at a different time in instantaneously the same piece of the code. Now we see the example of this function pointer, and here I just create a new file. Here I just write hash include io stream using namespace std integer main. Okay, now here I just write a function name which is swap, and which is integer and the and sign, and then integer which is the and sign. What is the and signs mean here? This is the pointer here, so it will store the address here, means integer and integer and will store the address of the variables here, a which is equal to 1 and b which is equal to 2. Now cout which is value before swapping, and it's an and line. Now cout and here a which is equal to a and end line. Now cout b which is equal to b and the end line. Now here I just swap a value a and b. So cout which is a, and then the value of a is a and end line. Here I just write cout which is value after swapping, and its end line. Now cout, which is b which is equal to b and end line. Okay, now return 0, and now value, which is swap and integer and n1 and integer and n2. Now integer temporary file, and which is temp is equal to n1, and here I just swipe the value n1 which is equal to n2 and n2 which is equal to temp. So I just take a third variable here. Now I just check the output. So here we have an error in this stage, and it's a cout, and yes, it's a void and swap, which is the AND operator. Now I just compile it again and check return, and then I just compile. So I have another error which is in cout, and after n means a single line break here. Now I just run it again. So we have the same error here. Yes, it's because of I just have two programs, but I compile it together and compile and run it again. And yes, you can see the expected output. So value before swapping is 1 and 2. Then after swapping, A is equal to 2 and B is equal to 1. In this program, first of all, I just take a swap value and use the AND operator to storing the value to the variable. Then we have the two variables with the value of A1 and B2. Then I just print three statements here and then go to the swapping. I just call a function here. So A and B as a parameters. Now I just return the function types here and define the function's name as void, and which is integer AND operator is equal to n1 and integer AND operator is equal to n2. Then I just take a third variable which is a temporary file. So I just store n1 in temp, then n1 take n1 is equal to n2 means A is equal to B. Then I just take n which is equal to temp. So I just swipe these values with the help of third variables. So this is the function in C++ and the examples of the functions in C++. Thanks for watching this lecture. See you in next lecture.
Welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to talking about the function or the user defined function in C++. In programming, functions refer to a segment that groups code to perform a specific task. Depending on whatever a function is predefined or created by the programmer. So there are two types of function. First one is library function and another one is user defined function. We will talk about the library function in our next lecture, but here we just talking about the user defined function first. So C++ allows programmer to define their own functions. Means you are simply define your own functions. Okay, so a user defined function groups code to perform a specific task, and that group of code is given a given a name identifier. When the function is invoked from any part of the program, it all execute the code defined by the body of the function. Okay, so how user defined function work in C++? So let's just see. I have these header files. Okay, and I just close this file right here. So these are the libraries and the header files. Consider this code that when a program begins return running, the system calls the main. Means when the program is running, so system call the main function. That is by default function. Okay, so the system start executing code from main function. When control of the program reach to the function name, means the function name here is main function. So inside main, it's moved to integer main and the function name, and all the code inside main function is executed. Then control of the program moves back to the main function with where the code after the call of the function name is executed as shown to your screen. Let's just see how the user defined function works and how we just declare the user defined function. So here I am just defining the user defined function. So we are defining the user defined function at main, and here this is the main function, and outside the main function I am just defining the user defined function, and I just call this function in the function body. So the function name here is add, two parameters and the parameters. So these are the two parameters, means this is a function prototype and the function declaration here. So what is a function prototype and the declaration? So if a user defined function is defined after main function, compiler will show an error. It is because compiler is unaware of user defined function type of the argument passing to the function and return the type. So in C++, function prototype is a declaration of function without its body to give compiler information about user defined function, and the function prototype in this code, like this one integer add, is like integer add and integer. You can see that there is no body of the function in the prototype. Also there are only return types of arguments by no arguments. You can also declare function prototype, as you can see here, like function prototype with then parameters like a and then b. Okay, so this is simple called the user defined function. So here we just not need a and b right here. So then I just go to the integer number one and integer number one and number two, and then sum this. So I just creating a program like number one is sum of number two with the help of user defined function, and cout, which is enter to number to add values. Then I just write cin number one and number two. So cin two numbers right here, number one and number two, and then here I just call my user defined function. So sum, which is equal to add. Simply when you're just calling the user defined function, so simply you just write add in your code. So I just call this user defined function in the main body, and here I just write number one and number two, okay, which are the user input. Then I just write cout, and cout here is I just write sum, and sum, which is sum, so it will print the sum right here. So return, and the return here is 0. Okay, so let's just see. So far we are just defining our functions here. So our function definition is not like here we just simply write the function prototype and the declaration right here. Okay, now it's time to define the function with the help of parameters. Integer function name here is add, integer a and integer b. I just told you these are the function by passing the parameters. So this is the function data type, function name, and passing the value by its parameters. So what is the function name here? I just write integer add. So I just remove this and add, which is equal to a plus b. As you just see here, I just defining the logic of that. First, it take the user input from number 1 and number 2 and sum this, take the value in the sum. So it will go to the these all values go to the this add function. So I just add, take integer as a add, and then print the value which is a plus b, and then return type of this function is, I just write here add. So this is the return statement. Okay, so first I just simply prototype the function. Prototype means just simply design this function, means create the skeleton of the function right here. Then I just call this function right here, call at the main body, then defining the function. So in this, to execute the code of the function body, the user defined function need to invoke card. Okay, so in this program, add number 1 and number 2 inside the main body. Add number 1 and number 2 inside the main body, call the user defined function. So function return an integer which is stored in the variable add. So it will store in the variable add which is integer. Okay, so here we just go to the function definition. So as you can see here, when the function is called, control is transferred to the first statement of the function body, then other statement in the function body, and execute sequentially. I just execute this program and compile it again. So what is an error here? So integer main, so yes, missed the semicolon right here. Okay, so it is need two numbers to add the value. Okay, so I just add 8 plus 4. So sum here is, 8 plus c sum here is 11. Okay, so when all code inside the function definition is executed, the control of the program moves to call the program. You can see here, when I just add two values at number 1 and number 2, then it will store this value in the add, and it will go to the add these two values with the help of these parameters with add a plus b. So this is the simple program of function definition in the C++. If you not understand any of the thing in this program and any of the thing regarding to the user defined functions, prototype of the function, and I just call this function in the main body, so please you just let me know, because functions are very much important in C++ programs. So this is simply the beginning of the functions to try to make concept right here. So thanks for watching this lecture. If you find any of the if any of the problem regarding to this lecture, please let me know. Welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to talking about the library function in C++. Library functions are the built-in functions in C++ programming. Programmer can use library functions to invoke functions directly. They do not need to write it and themselves. So writing the library function, simply I just include one other library which is C Math. So C Math library here is the C Math is also known as a header file in C++ alias of math.h. Okay, so C Math is complex. Math is a library of you just see simple, it is library used in Python. For example, it will show the result of a square root and other result of the maths. Okay, so this program what I'm just creating here with this library function, so this is also a math program. So C Math observations of the character mathematical title offered by the Institute of Mathematics and its application. So this is simply the library which is used for solving the math problem. And here you just see I just write using namespace and integer name. So after that I just write double, and double here is the number. Then I just told you that I am just solving the math problem here, so I just write square root here, and then Cout, which is enter a number. Okay, so Cin, which is the number right here. Now it's time to create the logic to find the square root. So square root, which is equal to square root and then number. Okay, so sqrt means square root is a library functions to calculate the square root. So here I am just using the library function. So this is called the library functions, which is the built-in function in programming language. So for that, to call that function, so I just simply include this math library and then call this function right here. So Cout, which is square root of any number you want, which is number, and then I just write here is equal to, and then square root as our this variable. Now return 0. Okay, so let's just check the output and then explaining this code. So it is compiling right now. So you can see here I just need the square root of 9. So the square root of 9 is 3 with the help of this square root built-in function. Okay, so in this program, square means sqrt library functions invoke the calculate the square root of this number. Okay, what I just add here like 9, and then it will calculate the square root of that. So note that notice code include cmath in this program. Here cmath is a header file. The function definition of square root body of the function is present in the math header file, and you can use the function defined in cmath when you just include the content of the file cmath in this program using include cmath. So this is simply the content of this cmath. Okay, square rt. Okay, so at the last, every valid C++ program has at least one function. So we have the built-in function, which is the main function here. Okay, so if you find any other problem regarding to this library functions, please let me know. Thanks for watching this lecture. Welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to talking about the function call by its reference in C++. The call by reference method to passing arguments to a functions copy the reference of an argument into the formal parameters. Inside the function, the reference is used to access the actual argument used in the call. This means that change made to the parameters affect the passed argument. Let's just see the example of passing the value by its reference in C++. So I just import these header files right here, and outside this main function, so I just define one another function, which is void swap. So I just creating the program to swapping the value integer and using AND operator right here, and then x. So this AND operator is storing the result, means storing the value of this integer x and then integer y. I just declare the function here, means I just define the swap function here. Okay, then I just go to the local variable, which is integer a, which is equal to 100, integer b, which is equal to 200, and then Cout, which is I just write here before swap the value of a and here I just write the value of a, and then end line, copy this code, paste it here for the value of b and the value of b. Okay, now I just calling a function to the value of a swap value using the variable reference. Swap a and b. Okay, so these are the value of the variable by its reference. So see out right here, and then here I just write after swap the value of a, end line right here, and then here I just write the swap the value of b, and here I just write b. Okay, now return 0. Now what I just do here, so now here I just write that integer which is the name of temp, which is temporary file, storing the temporary files here. So temp which is equal to x. So here I just save the value of address at x, then x which is equal to y, the value of swiping, or just doing the means we are just swiping the value. So put y into the x right here, and then y which is equal to temp. Simply return the value. So simply the swap the values right here and then return the values. So output, and you can see here after swiping the value is 100, means the value of a after swiping which is 100. So this is simple program to swiping the value with the help of calling functions calling by the reference. If you find any other problem regarding this lecture, please let me know. Thanks for watching this lecture.